Hello and welcome. I am Gimba Umar. Tonight, National Economic Council agrees to audit use of the ecological funds by governors, also promises to deal with cattle rustlers and militia groups. Former SGF appears unperturbed as he again fails to answer Senate committee's summons over alleged contract scam. Those above 18 years of age now have opportunity to vote in the 2019 election, but they are to obtain INEC voter cards. And an attempted coup is foiled in South Africa, raising fears of another era of military domination in politics.
And on business news tonight, top executives of Nigeria's banking institutions agree to work with the CBN to get Nigeria out of recession.
And on sports news, French club Lille reveals the Super Eagles goalkeeper Vincent Eyama will miss the rest of the season owing to injury.
And from Abuja, former Vice President Atiku Abubakar blows hot, says failing economy as a result of poor leadership.
We begin tonight with the National Economic Council's determination to deal with the issue of cattle rustlers in the northern part of the country and indeed across Nigeria. The council has agreed it will smoke out militia groups that have caused mayhem, especially in very vulnerable communities. The meeting, chaired by the Vice President, Professor Osinbajo, also dealt with issues of diversion of ecological funds meant for erosion-devastated areas, particularly in the southeastern zone, with a promise to audit the ecological funds, which is now about 33.6 billion naira. And throwing more light, the governor of Anambra State, who briefed the media after the meeting, said it decided to audit the fund because although states have not collected any money since the coming into office of President Muhammadu Buhari almost 2 years ago, the balance appears to be dwindling.
The disbursement and control of the nation's ecological fund has more than once taken up debate at the executive level and among some governors. This time, the 36 governors of the Federation have redirected focus on the management of dwindling funds. The Ecological Fund, which is an intervention facility set aside to tackle the multifarious ecological problems ravaging communities across the country, is currently pegged at 33.6 billion naira.
It appears in the last 1 year or 2 years, no state has been given ecological fund. There is a purpose for ecological fund, and if we are not given the ecological fund and we suspect or we are seeing that instead of moving forward or saying that the ecological fund is dwindling, is going down, then it means that somebody else is using it.
The Council decided that an audit of ecological fund be carried out. Ad hoc committee has been set up to do the audit and come up with recommendations on how the funds shall be managed. States and local governments now to keep their share of the resource fund and ecology fund for use for intervention as the need arises in their respective jurisdictions.
The growing challenge of cattle rustling, ethnic and farmers and herdsmen clashes have equally drawn urgent attention. The determination to stamp out violence across the country is also on track.
Basically, the security agencies have commenced a general crackdown, a nationwide crackdown against gunmen, cattle rustlers, armed militants, as well as other restless militia groups in the country. The governors in their response have acknowledged the efforts of the federal government in trying to curb these activities. They've also agreed to collaborate further with the security agencies in dealing with these issues.
The Minister of Health equally briefed the Council on efforts to tame the spread of the deadly meningitis disease. According to the government, over 9,000 cases of the disease have been recorded in affected states. The government concluded that 46.7 billion naira is required to vaccinate Nigerians against meningitis. Gloria Umezuke, Channels Television News.
For the third time, the suspended Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Mr. Babachir Lawal, has again failed to appear before the Senate committee probing the alleged contract scam involving the former SGF. Mr. Lawal is alleged to have awarded a contract running into millions of naira under the presidential initiative in the Northeast without due process. The SGF is being investigated by another committee set up by the federal government and headed by the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo.
These chairs in a Senate hearing room are intended to seat the suspended Secretary to the Government of the Federation and his team. Mr. Babachir David Lawal is scheduled to meet with the Senate ad hoc committee to give his own side in the allegations of a contract scandal involving the presidential initiative for the Northeast, an intervention agency under his office. But after a while, it was clear that Mr. Babachir Lawal would not be making an appearance. This is the third time Mr. Babachir Lawal has refused to appear before this committee investigating the humanitarian crisis in the Northeast and the role the presidential initiative for the Northeast has played in addressing the crisis.
We thought that now that he is under suspension, he could have had enough time to come over here. You can see he's not here. So as far as we are concerned, we will certainly go ahead and present our report to the floor of the Senate based on the facts, the figures we have with us in our disposal.
The committee, in an interim report adopted by the Senate in December 2016, accused Mr. Babachir Lawal of using his position to award a contract to a company he had interest in under the presidential initiative for the Northeast. Mr. Lawal has denied any wrongdoing. President Buhari last week suspended Mr. Babachir Lawal over the allegation made by the Senate and constituted a three-man investigative committee headed by Vice President Yemi Osinbajo to investigate Mr. Lawal. In another development, the senior special assistant to the President on National Assembly matters, Senator Pt.1, has confirmed that the police has returned all the items seized from the home of Senator Danjuma Goje. Senator Enang, in a statement, says the presidency has intervened by reaching out to the parties concerned to resolve the matter. He stated that the money and documents seized were in the course of a routine police exercise. Senator Danjuma Goje had raised the alarm on Wednesday that some of the documents seized were reports of a 2017 budget. Linda Akibi, Channels Television News.
The House of Representatives has criticized the Vice President Yemi Osinbajo over his alleged statement on the position of the presidency on the appointment of the chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, Ibrahim Magu. In a passionate debate, lawmakers say the statement by the Vice President is capable of eroding the doctrine of separation of powers. Our correspondent Lanry Lasisi reports.
Vis-a-vis the powers of the judiciary. Also,
it's a motion that held the attention of the House. Sponsored by the minority leader of the House, the motion is on the need to prevent the erosion of the doctrine of separation of powers in the nation's democratic practice.
A statement was credited to the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, to the effect that the appointment of the chairman of the EFCC does not require confirmation of the Senate in line with Section 171 of the 1999 Constitution as amended.
This statement, according to the lawmakers, is the problem.
The Vice President, if he has made that statement, number one, he has usurped the power of the courts to interpret the Constitution. And I believe that the EFCC is not an arm of any parastatal that you can just will the appointment without the confirmation of the Senate.
I think this House has the power to invite the VP to come and explain himself to us why he has to make this statement. Is he a way of ridiculing he wants to ridicule the parliament?
One by one, the lawmakers throw their weight behind the motion, which is calling on the House to urge officials of the executive to refrain from making statements that makes it appear they are taking over the powers of the judiciary. The motion also calls on the House to urge President Muhammadu Buhari to approach the court for interpretation of any conflict in the EFCC Act. But one lawmaker calls for caution.
Is to set aside the 3 resolutions as canvassed by the Honorable Minority Leader and substitute it with 1 resolution, and that is to investigate the veracity of the information that has been so credited to the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Those in favor of the amendment say aye. Those against it say nay. The nays have it.
Another amendment proposing that the National Assembly approach the court instead of urging the president to do so suffers a similar fate.
Those in favor of the amendment say aye. Those against it say nay. The nays have it.
The Speaker then puts the motion itself to a voice vote.
Those in favor of the motion as amended say aye. Those against it say nay. Ayes have it.
The House Committee on Legislative Compliance has been directed to ensure that these resolutions are implemented. Lanre Lasese, Channels Television News.
In the meantime, a federal high court sitting in Lagos today faulted a plea bargain agreement between the EFCC and an INEC official, Christian Nwosu, who was convicted on charges of money laundering. Justice Muhammad Idris held that the convicts deserved a heavier sentence and not just a fine of 500,000 naira upon conviction as proposed by the EFCC. The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission had charged the former Minister of Petroleum Resources, Diziani Alison Madueke, and 3 officials of the Independent National Electoral Commission for allegedly taking bribes from the former minister to compromise the 2015 general elections. Our judiciary correspondent, Shola Shoele, reports.
3 INEC officials, Christian Nwosu, Yisa Adedoyin and Tijani Bashir, were alleged to have taken bribes from a former Minister of Petroleum, Mrs. Diziani Alison Madueke, sometime in March 2015 for the purpose of manipulating the outcome of the 2015 general elections. In a 7-count charge put before the court, the EFCC detailed the amount collected by each of the men from the former minister, who is said to still be at large. The first defendant, Mr. Christian Nwosu, had immediately pleaded guilty to a charge of directly receiving the sum of 30 million naira from a larger amount of 264 million naira shared by the men, monies which were said to be proceeds of crime. His colleagues, however, pleaded not guilty to the charges. While the court convicted Mr. Nwosu, the other 2 were granted bail pending the commencement of their trial. The Commission then informed the court of a plea bargain agreement between the EFCC and the first defendant, Mr. Nwosu. In his judgment on the sentence, Justice Idris held that the penalty set out in the plea bargain agreement ran contrary to the provisions of Section 16(2)(b) of the Money Laundering Prohibition Amendment Act of 2012. The section stipulates a prison term of not less than 2 years or a fine of not less than 10 million naira. Justice Idris held that for this reason he finds the plea bargain agreement of a fine of 500,000 naira as inadequate. The court, however, gave the parties an opportunity to consider their options and decide whether they were willing to continue with the plea bargain. Counsel to the first defendant then asked for a short adjournment to enable him to discuss with his client on whether to proceed. The counsel declined to comment on the day's proceedings, but here's the reaction of the EFCC's counsel.
By the provisions on 270 of the Administration of Criminal and Justice Act, if the defense elected to back out or rescind from this agreement, it indicates that the trial will start de novo and the file may be remitted to the CJA for reassignment to another judge. That is what the law says. But I don't know the decision that the defense will take.
The EFCC has also given an indication that another of the defendants is already pursuing a plea bargain agreement. Proceedings have, however, been adjourned to the 3rd of May, by which time the plea bargain agreement may have been reworked to comply with the law if the parties elect to continue. Shola Shoyeli, Channels Television News.